Good evening. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker, who you may already know from his long-term regular stints on the radio all about birds. So Dr. Jerry Jackson is Professor Emeritus of Ecological Sciences and former Whitaker Eminent Scholar in Science at Florida Gulf Coast University and Professor Emeritus at Mississippi State University. So Jerry's expertise focuses on forest and coastal ecosystems, bird management issues associated with aviation, and the history of ornithology. He's editor or author of 25 books and more than 300 articles in the professional and popular literature. Dr. Jackson has taught biodiversity concepts at the 3rd and 5th grade levels and at 11 universities in Sumatra and Java and Indonesia. Wow, what cool places. His research and teaching has also taken him to Cuba to study IvoryBilled woodpeckers, to the Peruvian Amazon to teach tropical ecology, and to the Canadian Arctic to teach Arctic ecology. He co-hosted a weekly nature-oriented feature called Southern Outdoors on CBS TV in Mississippi for 13 years, contributed to public television's Scientific American Frontiers series and Canadian Broadcasting's Prairie Scape Dogs. He is also featured in the documentary film Ghost Bird about the searches for the IvoryBilled woodpecker. Dr. Jackson has hosted a daily public radio feature in Southwest Florida called With the Wild Things for over the past 20 years. You're still doing that, right, Dr. Jackson?
Yes, ma'am. This is year 22.
And what is the call numbers of the radio station?
WGCU, it's 90.1 FM if you're in Sarasota.
Great. And what time is it?
It's on at 7:19 in the morning.
Wow.
And at 5:18 in the afternoon. And if you tune in at 7:21 or 5:20, you've missed it. It's a minute and a half long.
So Dr. Jackson has served on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Red-Cockaded Woodpecker, IvoryBilled Woodpecker, and South Florida Ecosystems Endangered Species Recovery Teams, and on the National Invasive Species Advisory Committee. He has been honored by being named a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the American Ornithologists Union, and the Explorers Club. He and his wife, Betty, also an ornithologist and former chair of the Biological Sciences Department at Florida Gulf Coast University, live and are studying birds in Naples, Florida. So I'm so thrilled to welcome you, Dr. Jackson. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Let's see. I hit the slideshow. How do I do that?
Screen share at the bottom.
Screen
Green
share
button.
at the bottom. I don't have there. No.
It should be a bright green button.
There we go.
Okay.
And now we open it up. How do we do that?
At the far left, the round button with the arrow. Down, just down. No, not that one.
Oh,
There.
right.
Yeah.
Left one
Cancel
more.
that. Yeah. And then go back there. Just there you are.
There we go. Okay. Colors of Spring, exploring the diversity and roles of color and also texture in birds. What are the colors of spring? Well, traditionally, you might think of the beauty of some of Florida's spring wildflowers like marsh pink and Nuttall's thistle, both of which I photographed out at Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. And some of them are starting to bloom right now. I volunteer out there, and if you come on Wednesdays, you might, I can give you a tour out there. The thing I want to talk about today, though, is about the colors and textures of birds. At no other time of year are the colors of birds' feathers, skin, bill, legs, and eyes so vibrant and varied, and the patterns and textures so diverse. Within species, we find this greater diversity as a result of the transition from winter to breeding plumage, distinctive colors and patterns in chicks and fledglings, and in non-breeding and breeding adults. This photo of a cedar waxwing was taken by my oldest son, who is photo editor for the Baltimore Sun newspaper and a fine bird photographer, as you can see. And what you see there is the satin-like plumage of a cedar waxwing in its breeding plumage. That very smooth appearance that you see betrays the presence of powder downs that are scattered throughout its feathers. Powder downs occur in many species of birds. In cedar waxwings, they happen to be scattered throughout the normal plumage of birds. And I've defined powder down at the bottom. And as we go through the program, things that have that orange color to the letters are definitions that you might want to look at if you don't know what the word means. Powder downs are continuously growing feathers that crumble into a dust that coats other feathers, giving them a dull, satiny appearance and a very soft, smooth texture. The powder downs of the cedar waxwing are scattered throughout its plumage. Along our way, I'm going to try to answer the following questions about bird colors. Where do the colors and textures come from? Many of them are from pigments. Some are what we refer to as schemochromes, or colors that are a result of the structure of the feather. How do they vary with season, age, and sex? Why do they vary? What roles do these colors play in the lives of birds? And I'm going to begin with the double-crested cormorant, a bird that is sometimes people ask, where are the crests? I don't see any crests. Well, look at the bird on the right, and you can see the two crests that it has. That's why it's called double-crested. The sexes of double-crested cormorants look alike, but the birds of different ages look different. And in the breeding plumage only do you see the double crests. So on the far left is a hatching year or second year bird in the spring. It's brown with speckles in a very diverse kind of manner. No two double-crested cormorants look alike at that age. In the middle of cormorant in flight, you can see it's beginning to show some breeding colors on its face and its eye, but it's not nearly as bright as it is, nor as dark on the top of the bill as the bird on the right, which is in its breeding plumage. It's a third-year bird during the breeding season, and the crests are pretty obvious. Here again, the eye and skin colors are really dramatic in these birds. The second-year bird, you can see the turquoise eyes that it has and the orange face. Most of the year, you don't see that orange. The eyes remain that turquoise color most of the year, though. And during the breeding season, the intensity of the blue increases, and the lining of the throat is blue. And you can see that in this bird that has opened his mouth for us just so we could see it. And you can still see the one of the double crests that it has. Really an incredible bird. It's also the bird that was featured in the Canadian broadcast Prairie Scapegoats, about the scapegoat for why people weren't catching the fish that they wanted to. It's a problem that is not as real a problem as people try to make it out to be. Killdeer, everyone knows, they're birds of open environments with camouflaging earth tone colors, counter shading, and disruptive color patterns that aid in their survival. Camouflage refers to any color or pattern that helps a bird blend in with its environment. And this one is got a number of camouflaging characteristics. Counter shading means dark above blending in with the ground when seen from above, and light below blending in with the sky when seen from below. And disruptive refers to bold marks, such as the black bands of the neck and head of this killdeer that disrupt the outline of the bird, making it harder to see in a casual scan of the environment. And if you look at this killdeer, it happens to be the same one, the behavior can also result in a very different appearance, showing the disruptive function of the bold marks. So this bird saw me all of a sudden and wasn't quite sure and raised its head up, so you can see it expands the black band and it sort of separates the head from the body when it does that. And that's typical of a disruptive effect that birds' colorations can sometimes have. Gives a new meaning to sticking your neck out. European starlings are exotic invasive, but I'm afraid they're here to stay. When I was 10 years old, living in Iowa and delivering the Des Moines Register every morning, even at 30 below zero, one snowy morning, I saw a bird that I had never seen before. And I thought it was the most beautiful bird that I had ever seen. And I wrote a poem about it, titled "The Most Beautiful Bird I Ever Saw." They say that beauty is only skin deep, but surely the bird on that snowy morning atop the newspaper stand across the street was wonderful, elegant, stunning. Black tones touched with iridescent green, white spots accented its attire. Or were they snowflakes that dotted the sheen? Narrow pointed feathers, fingers of black fire, bristled from its neck and breast. What was this magical bird so fancifully dressed? Surely the bird of a poet. I knew I had to know it. Well, I know it today. And the starling is one that changes plumage between winter and summer in a dramatic way. In the winter, starlings are covered with spots all over their back, all over their breast, all over their head. And the spots are the tips of the feathers. And gradually through the winter, those tips wear off, so that by breeding season, it's no longer spotted in many of those places. In winter, a starling's bill is black to dark brown to sort of mottled like this one is. But come summer, the bird looks like this. And right now they look like this. And right now they're courting just like the bird on the right here. And one of the really interesting things you can see about starlings is that the breeding males have a yellow bill in the spring, and they have a bill that is blue at the base. Can you see the blue at the base up here? And interestingly and appropriately, I guess, the breeding female has a yellow bill and pink at the base. So you can tell the boys and girls with pink and blue. And I couldn't help but wonder if that isn't where our using pink and blue for girls and boys came from, but who knows. And over here, the male is using his long, narrow, very narrow and very long throat feathers in his nest site defense display. The female does not have these long, narrow feathers. They're much broader, and you can see over here that it has feathers, but the feathers are not nearly as narrow. Because of its size and diversity of habitats, birds show diversity of stages in chick development. Altricial is the term that refers to birds that have a very short incubation period, and the young are hatched naked and helpless at hatching, such as bluebird chicks or the chicks of woodpeckers. And I've got some woodpecker chicks that I'll show you in a little bit. Semi-precocial refers to birds with a long incubation period, and their chicks are down covered and active and remain in or near the nest and dependent on being fed, such as gulls and terns and owls and hawks and brown pelicans. Precocial refers to birds with a long incubation period, usually a month or more. Down covered active chicks leave the nest immediately, and they're led to food but feed themselves, such as in killdeer chicks. They're never fed by their parents. They're just led to food. Redheaded woodpeckers have no differences in appearance of the sexes. Males and females, you simply cannot tell apart unless you're studying their behavior. But there are great differences between adults and juveniles. Why those differences? Why are the males and females of redheaded woodpeckers just alike? And the answers are really interesting. They have to do with their behavior. Redheaded woodpeckers are in a dining group that is largely fly catching. They go out, they'll perch on a utility pole or even on a wire and fly out and catch flying insects. Or they will behave like a kestrel and stoop, fly to the ground to catch a grasshopper or an insect that they see. But as woodpeckers go, they are not at all good peckers. They have a hard time excavating a cavity, and their cavities are usually excavated in a dead, long dead tree that is cracked down the sides of it so that they could use the crack as an opening, and they very carefully excavate using that crack so that the entrance to their cavity is often a little bit elongate or odd shaped because they've had to use the crack as a place to get into the tree. And you might ask, why do they still have the same kind of plumage, so much red on the head? Well, among woodpeckers, red is a symbol of aggression. It is a symbol of maleness and territoriality in woodpeckers, and in most other birds too, by the way. Territoriality is male against male and female against female. So a male doesn't want any other males around, so he'll chase another male. A female doesn't want any other females around, so she'll chase another female away. But the female is perfectly happy to invite another male in, and the male is perfectly happy to invite another female in. So if they both look like really super males because they have so much red, they can then compete almost always successfully for a cavity from another woodpecker, and particularly the red-bellied woodpecker. Red-headed woodpeckers will, this time of year, will go after red-bellied woodpecker cavities. The female red-bellied woodpecker says, "Come on in, fellas." And both the male and the female redhead give chase to the male red-bellied woodpecker, while the female just sits there and does nothing. And the aggressiveness of the red-headed woodpecker adults passes on over into the young, and they will chase another adult red-headed woodpecker away. But this one looks so much different that they are labeled, so to speak, as just kids. Don't bother me. And that is true of many species of birds, that the young look quite different from the adults and are recognized by the adults as being just kids and not to worry about them. They're no competition. Way back in 1966, I was studying red-headed woodpeckers in Kansas and red-bellied woodpeckers and downy woodpeckers. I did some work on the woodpeckers of Kansas. And I found a red-headed woodpecker nest at a very busy rural intersection of two gravel roads that was in this dead cottonwood. And the birds were just beginning to excavate it. And I wanted to know what was going on inside the nest. So over a period of several days while they were excavating, I would come out, spend about 5 minutes each day, putting up one board a day until I had a platform. And then I cut a hole in the back of the tree until I got into the nest, put a piece of glass over the hole so that I could sit in that blind that I built and watch what was going on inside of the nest. And I learned a great deal from that. When the eggs hatch, which is after a period of about 12 days of incubation, the young are totally helpless. They have an egg tooth, which is, oops, we got way ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. What happened there? Oh, come on. Sorry. I hit the wrong button. Let's go down this way now. Okay. They have an egg tooth on the upper bill that is exceptionally large and white. And if you look, you can see there's an egg tooth also on the lower bill. And there is a large white swelling on the side of the mouth on both sides. And the tip of the tongue, which you can barely see there, is also shiny white. So when the woodpecker sticks its head in the hole, the first thing that I learned was that it's the change from light to dark that initiates a begging response of the young, and the young will come up begging. And when it opens its mouth, what the adult can see isn't much because it's dark in there because she's still blocking the hole, or the male is still blocking the hole. But they can see those 4 spots of white on the upper bill, lower bill, and to the side of the mouth, plus a spot in the middle, the tongue. And they aim for the spot in the middle, and the young gets its food. The young in between feedings are very weak. They have a big body, little tiny wings, a very long neck, and a very heavy head. They sit in the middle of the nest, and the one that is hungriest will stay up begging after all of the others have put their head down. The one that gets the food at any feeding effort is the first one to put its head down because it's got that extra weight in its head. It goes down, so it ends up on the bottom. And the one that is on top is the one that's hungriest, the one that hasn't been fed. So each of the chicks gets fed in sequence. And it's because of that behavior. And you can notice there's sitting on a bed of chips. The adults every day would come in and knock a few chips off the side to cover up the poop that was in the bottom that they didn't get taken out. They usually take it out, but they keep it covered up, keep a nice dry platform for the young. But they don't get any feathers at all until about the age of 5 or 6 days. And then by 7 days, you can begin to see typical plumage. Okay, next one. Late spring and summer provide a continual parade of birds in transition as fledglings mature to adulthood. This is great horned owl, and the chick starts out covered with down. It's a semi-precocial bird, one that is capable of moving around a lot, but not capable of feeding itself. This is one in my backyard, a young one that had fledged, still being fed by parents. And here's an adult, a nice photo by Rod Wiley from down here. Oh, am I losing control? Okay, there we go. Common gallinules are also incredibly interesting. They have precocial young, ones that are capable of feeding themselves immediately, but they are also fed by their parents and by their siblings. The older young, the young from the first nest will stick around and help feed the young from the next nest every time. This particular pair of common gallinules, I followed through 7 consecutive nests, each nest producing at least one young that survived. And you can see that when they are hatched, these are hatchlings, the young have a bare head, totally bare wings sticking out down here. You can even see the egg tooth on the upper bill of the chick here. Most birds only have an egg tooth on the upper bill. Woodpeckers are different in having an egg tooth on both bills, both the upper and the lower. And
Would you be willing to make your full screen? And again, can you do that, Jerry?
full screen. Let's see, how do I do full screen?
To the left, the arrow in the round button at the top left. Yeah, nope, that'll start, well, you'll get there now.
Okay, now what?
Now you just
Advance.
hit advance, you're at the beginning. So just advance till you get to where you need to be.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No
This is-
worries, it's better to see the full.
Okay,
There we are.
is that full screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I couldn't tell that. Florida mottle ducks are birds with precocial young. They do not feed their young at all. They just lead them to food. And here's a female with her brood, and she just stands guard over them and will chase a potential predator away, or try to anyway. Note the plumage pattern on the chicks. Particularly look at this one down here. You can see its back. On the rear of chicks with the normal plumage, there's a spot on each side. Field guide photos that show the chicks usually show them from the side like this, so you don't realize that there's a spot on the other side. But these are false eye spots, and they protect the chicks from attack from a predator from behind, such as a hawk or an owl. And it's really interesting. Here they are with the 2 spots showing on the back end of them. Here's the male, here's the female. The male isn't always around, but the female stays right with them. And when they are swimming, the chicks will follow, usually, not always, but usually tight together, one behind the other, and they stay real close to the female so that there's spots back here. And what that looks like from a distance in terms of a potential predator like a great horned owl or a hawk is the hawk or owl can see these 2 spots back here, thinks this is the head of the animal, and thinks that this may be an otter, which is a terribly aggressive and successful defender of its from hawks and owls. So it may be that the reason why they're swimming like this together is that to make it look like this is one big long animal like an otter. And the image of doing that is enhanced because when the young are swimming like this, they swim synchronously, right foot forward, left foot forward, right foot forward. And so the movement is very, very smooth as they're going along when they're doing that. Snowy egrets, one of my favorite birds, the bird with the golden slippers. During the breeding season, an adult has orange yellow face and feet, and the legs are shiny black. During the winter, the feet are yellow, and there's yellow on the back of the legs in the wintertime, and it's yellow on the face. And you can see the difference here. This is a bird that was exactly in the same spot at 2 different times when I took the photos. And it was at Eagle Lakes Park here in Naples, which is a really good place to go birding. And you can also see the Egrets on the back, the fine filamentous feathers for which these birds were killed as in the early years of the 20th century and throughout the 19th century. This bird doesn't have those. It's starting to get a few, I think, but not many. Why are so many waders white? And the answer to that is that because they're out in the open, they can be seen more easily by being white, and there's safety in numbers. If they get together with others, then they're less likely to be attacked, particularly if they happen to stay in the middle of a group. This is a group of snowy egrets that are catching fish that have just hatched, or they're schooling. They've hatched a little while ago, but are schooling, and they're starting to get bigger. And they're actually flying out, not hovering, but scooping them up as they fly by. And they go one after another to get the fish. This was also at Eagle Lakes Park in Naples. White is a universal attractant for many egrets, ibises, storks, and other aquatic birds. And this is a group of snowy egrets here, snowy egret here, snowy egret here, snowy egret here, and great egrets back here. There's also some ibises in front of these, and they were all waiting for the young fishes to come close to shore so that they could catch them. And they had great luck because there were Florida gar, a fish, that was also after those, and they would chase them toward the shore to get them into shallow water where they could easily catch them. And they were chasing them right into the mouths of the egrets. And the egrets would scare them back out right into the mouths of the gar. So it was a really interesting case of working together between a fish and these birds. But how do they stay so white in that muddy water? And that's a great question. It's because of powder downs. All of our herons and egrets have powder downs, and their powder downs, which are again growing feathers, continuously growing feathers that crumble when they're rubbed. Their powder downs are, did it again, let's see, are in 4 separate patches. Actually, 2 of them are right against one another on the chest, and 1 is on each flank. And the bird throughout the day will reach into one of those patches and grab a billful of powder downs. And these are the powder downs down here, and just pull them out and rub them on its feathers. And that keeps putting a coating on the feathers. That coating will stop there being a reflection of its whiteness in the water. It doesn't reflect the sunlight, and at the same time it will cover up any dirty spots. And if they get dirty, then the powder downs will absorb the stuff and just fall off, and they put more powder downs on. So you can see, you rarely see a great egret, a snowy egret that looks like it's dirty. And this is a breeding season one again. Tricolored herons have winter plumages that are slightly different than summer plumages. A little touch of red or rust color on them, particularly on the neck sometimes. The bill is different. It's yellow, black on top, but not totally black. A little bit more black on the upper bill than none on the lower bill in the wintertime. And the legs are sort of greenish yellow. And during the breeding season, they have a really dark tip to the bill, a blue base to the bill, and they have a darker gray plumage that they achieve during the spring, and sort of maroon colored legs, reddish colored legs. So they're quite different. And the young ones also have different plumages, all with a tinge of rust color on the neck, some with more than on others. You can see a tinge of rust in the wing here on this young one. And you can also see the greenish yellow legs on both of these young birds. And I put the dates in. These are both in September, 9 and 10 September at Eagle Lakes Park. White ibises are also white and also join other white birds, just like the egrets and herons do, except the juvenile is not white. It's got a lot of brown. The juvenile, though, always has a white belly. The glossy ibis, which occurs here too, never has white on it. It never has a white belly. So you can always tell a glossy ibis from a young white ibis. One of the interesting things about white ibis is they feed out in the grass in the open a great deal, even in the heat of summer, and they get hot. And when they get hot, they will raise the feathers over the upper back, right in here. And that is exposing the skin just above the heart to the cooler air. And you can watch white ibis and you can see them as they're getting hot, raising those feathers up more and more in order to cool off. So the hot blood going through their heart is cooled off by the air circulating underneath the feathers. Even in early spring, even in the winter to some extent, the bill and the face are pink and it gets redder and redder. And so here is a breeding bird, and this one happens to be a female. The female develops a very large gular sac. That's G-U-L-A-R. That's the part of the throat. It's a throat pouch that she develops. And if you haven't noticed, white ibis have beautiful blue eyes as adults. The palm warbler is one of the most common birds right now in Naples and Fort Myers, probably up there also. And it is a bird that arrives in the late part of December sometimes a little earlier, but by January, it's pretty much dominating the warblers that are here. And you can always tell it because it's got yellow under the tail and a little bit of yellow green on top of the tail, but not bright yellow. And it's got a white eye line, and it's out in the grass, and it is pumping its tail up and down all the time, up and down, wherever it goes. So if you see a little warbler in the grass, that's what it is going to be a palm warbler. And they develop by February a little bit of rust on top of the head. They're starting to get their new feathers for breeding, and this is a bird just about ready to migrate north, getting more yellow on the breast as well as under the tail. The pine warbler is a common bird at feeders, and you can see pine warblers that look like this in late spring. This is the 19th of March. Just about now, you should be able to find pine warblers at your feeder that look like this. But second year females look more like this. And this is what they look like most of the time earlier in the spring, January and December. Common gallinules, again, I wanted to say a little bit more about them. I told you that the older chicks will stay around and feed the younger chicks. Here's one of the older chicks. They keep a brownish colored bill for a long time. But as soon as that bill starts to turn red, the adult male will chase them away. And here's the adult male chasing an older chick away because its bill has turned red, so it's no longer welcome around. Northern cardinal adults are everybody's favorite bird because it's so beautiful and colorful. And in the breeding season, the male looks like this with a nice big crest with a nice red bill. And the female looks like this with the same red bill and just a touch of red on top, but subdued red on the wings and tail, and mostly brown on the breast and on the back. Fledgling northern cardinals can always be identified because they do not have a red bill. Again, it's like the woodpecker that's got a totally different appearance. These birds, the bill is the badge that says, hey, I'm just a kid, leave me alone. And they are not chased away by the adults. This dark color gradually changes so that there'll only be a black spot at this part of the upper bill and this part of the lower bill for a long time. And you'll see birds like that with just a spot of black. There's still a juvenile. It's a bird of the year, even in December. And here is a female, and here is a male that is starting to get some red, but not nearly as bright. The feathers of young birds, all young birds, are weak feathers. They are not nearly as complete, not nearly as strong as the feathers of adults. So they're not going to be shiny. They're not going to be as bright. And they are weak because they grow fast. They grow real fast. The best thing a young bird can do is to get the heck out of the nest and get the ability to fly, to get away. The nest is a place where predators can have their way and eat them all. And so there's selection to get out of the nest quick. So they skimp on the production of feathers as they're growing up. And then once they're out of the nest, then they will grow a new set of feathers that are going to be stronger feathers and will be able to serve them better. Indigo bunting males always have some blue. Females are always a nondescript brown color. I don't have a female in here, but these are all males that have some blue on them. Here's an adult male down here, and you can see how bright it is, especially the blue on the head. And you can see that as it's molting, go back. Okay, as it's molting, the head and the upper back are the last or the first things to be brown and the last thing to turn blue. And so this one still has a little bit of brown on top of its head and a little bit here. This one is a little bit, this may be the same bird. It looks like it is. It's got the pattern there that's similar. And these are my feeders. The painted bunting is everybody's favorite bird because it's so garish. The male painted bunting with a purplish blue on its head and neck, red on the breast, chartreuse on the back, and just so many colors. It's just magical. And you would think that it would be the most conspicuous thing, but it's not. It just blends into the bushes and shrubs that it's in. And because there's a lot of color in nature caused by light and shadows and the green leaves and things like that. The adult female looks like this, but don't think you've got a female when you see a bird like this, because it could be a second-year male. Second-year males look like females, and they, by looking like females, they can get close to other females and will sometimes even mate with a female. And they're not chased away by the male. The beauty of feeders is that you can sometimes get multiple views of a species simultaneously. And I took advantage of that in getting this photograph of chipping sparrows, 4 different chipping sparrows at the one of our feeders. And you can see some of the differences in their plumage. The adult has a nice chestnut colored head with a white stripe down the middle, as you can see here. And the younger ones will have a lot of black in the head. And this one's more chestnut also. These are almost all alike, but this one is younger. It doesn't have the white stripe either. Here's 2 together, and again you can see the blackness in there and the white stripe just developing on this one. And you can see that this bird is molting from a light colored belly to a darker gray belly, as is characteristic of breeding adults. Even blue jays can show color patterns that feeders can provide us with an opportunity to see them. This is a blue jay taking off from a feeder, and I caught the wing, the upper part of the wing, and you can see that those blue wings that you see on a perched blue jay aren't blue at all. They're mostly black, with only the inner vein of each of the primary feathers and secondary feathers having half the vein, the inner half of the vein is blue. That's the only blue that's there. But when you fold those feathers together, all you see is the blue that's there. The black pigment is important in all birds at the tip of the wing, because black pigment adds strength to the feathers. That's why gulls and some terns and WhiteIbis and things like that have black wingtips, because the black will keep their feathers from wearing, and they need those feathers to escape potential predators. Blue jays seem to all look alike, but look closely. They are very often individually recognizable to people by a unique pattern of white on the face, white and blue on the neck, and of the black halter around the neck. So you can see this one, the halter is broken right here, and it comes down, and then there's a bib here that seems to be somewhat separate, and it's got a white throat. This one, the white throat, has a blue tinge, and the white above the eye has a blue tinge to it. This one has a lot more white that's up there, and the blue is paler. This one has a pale neck, and this one has a darker neck, darker blue. And you could look at any 2 blue jays, and if you got them coming to your feeder, look closely. This one also has black on the tips of the bristles or over the nostrils. This one is lacking most of that black. And you should be able to identify Old Joe or Old Sue or whoever, whatever you want to call them. You can't tell the sexes apart usually, but you can at least identify individuals if you look closely at them. Red-bellied woodpeckers, the most common woodpecker we have, and a fun woodpecker at that. They are changing their ways in many ways. One of the things that they're changing their way is they're beginning to catch and eat the Cuban anole, the little brown lizards that we have in our yards. And I've seen several of them catch anoles. Now they'll hover over it, almost hover over it, follow it, and then dive down on top of it. The males have red all the way to the bill, over the top of the head and down the back of the neck. They also have a reddish colored cheek, and they may also have a little red on the chin, as they have here. Females have red only on the back of the head, and the young have no red at all at first. This one is starting to get a little red right up here, suggesting that maybe it's going to be a male, but for a long time they have no red at all. And the $64 million question or whatever, what about that red belly? Well, it's called a red-bellied woodpecker because it does have a red belly. This is the belly down here. The chest is up here, and it's not red. The belly, the red belly, is right between its legs. And the reason it got that name is that back in the early 1800s, late 1700s, when people were just naming these birds for the first time, they had no binoculars. They had to shoot the birds in order to get them. And they would shoot them, pick it up. Oh, look, it's got a red belly. And so they called it the red-bellied woodpecker. But now, when you see a red-bellied woodpecker, it's got that belly pushed up against a tree. So you can't see the red most of the time. And this happens to be one that we've banded and color banded so that we can study the behavior of individuals. And I believe that is it. Thank you very much.
Great. That was fascinating. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
So we have
Happy to
questions.
answer questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Well, one question that I know I had and one of our guests has is, have you ever seen an ivory-billed woodpecker? We actually had somebody talk about were they extinct or not several meetings ago. So I think we're all kind of.
Yeah, there are a number of TBs, true believers, out there. And I'm afraid that the likelihood of there being ivory-billed woodpeckers out there is about as likely as finding Sasquatch down in the Everglades. There simply is not enough habitat left. Back in 1987, I spent 2 years with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service searching for ivory-billed woodpeckers across the Southeast and evaluating the habitat that was available. And there is not enough old growth habitat to support a population. Ivory-billed woodpeckers required about 7 square miles of old growth forest per pair. And we know that from Jim Tanner's work. Jim was a good friend of mine, and he had studied ivory-billed woodpeckers in the Singer Tract of Louisiana for his doctoral dissertation. His is the only in-depth study of living ivory-billed woodpeckers that provides that kind of information. So we have nothing to back it up, but he provided us with enough evidence to know that they were feeding largely on cerambycid beetles. People look at ivory bills and pileated and think they're related. They are not at all closely related. The pileated woodpecker is most closely related to flickers. And they, like flickers, feed extensively and primarily on ants. And there's no shortage of ants. We got lots and lots of ants. Ivory-billed woodpeckers have close relatives in Mexico and South America. And they, like our ivory bill, feed on the larvae of cerambycid beetles. Cerambycid beetles are beetles that have larvae that can be 3 inches long and 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in diameter. Great big insects. And they have a life cycle. The beetles have a life cycle that requires an old growth tree that is dying.
Wow.
And as the tree dies, it gives off chemicals that the beetles, adult beetles, can sense, and they fly to that tree and they lay their eggs on the bark. The eggs hatch and the young larvae burrow through the bark into the heartwood of the tree, eating the heartwood as the tree is dying. And the tree will die within about 2 years. And the larvae will mature within about 2 years. Then they burrow to the outside, just under the bark. And they have a tunnel that they've made. They've eaten all of wood that was in the tunnel. And they pupate, they go into the dormant stage before emerging as an adult beetle. By that time, the tree is dead. The bark is loose, in part because of the work of the beetles. And all the ivory bill had to do was to come by and hit the bark with a glancing blow from the side, and the bark would fall off. And they could pluck the larvae out of the little chambers that they had pupated in and eat it. Now, is it possible there's still an ivory bill out there somewhere? Maybe, not at all likely. And it is, there's very little hope, because the chainsaws were invented in the 1940s. The last recorded ivory bill was in 1944. And that one was done right at the time when chainsaws were becoming popular and timber companies were cutting everything down. They were cutting everything down for paper, for wood, and also just to clear the land so that they could use the rich bottomland soil for soybeans. Soybeans were becoming popular at the time. And then we began channelizing streams and draining swamps. I mean, we brought in Melaleuca from Australia to try to dry up the Everglades. We do stupid things, but the end result is that we really don't have any great expanse of large old growth forest. I spent a lot of time searching for ivory bills then. I wrote a book on ivory-billed woodpeckers that was published by Smithsonian Press that summarizes things. There's a second edition of it that came out that talks about the 2005 sighting and those things. There was a lot of things that were simply wrong, things that were done wrong regarding that sighting. The first thing was they kept it secret. And the second thing is that they made maximum use of media, so that they got 60 minutes to come to the swamp there. And the guy on 60 Minutes says, "This is the Amazon of North America." And people saw that and thought, this is a really big swamp. It's not. The entire area where ivory bills were seen there along that river, the stretch of river, is 3 miles long and never more than 1 mile wide. That's 6 square miles. And it wasn't completely old growth. It had a lot of old growth in it, but it wasn't an old growth forest at all. Not only that, the southern end of it was at an interstate highway, and nowhere in that 6 square miles could you be without hearing the trucks on the interstate highway. Nowhere in there could you be without seeing beer cans and old tires and stuff like that tossed in the river where it was. It was not pristine habitat. It was not particularly good habitat.
Jerry, what were the, I know there, you said there weren't many old growth trees there. Were they mostly cypress? What were the old growth trees that?
They were old growth cypress, yeah. But the birds didn't nest in cypress that much. They also nested in pines. But when they put the first image up on the an aerial view of the biota view on the internet, they had taken the picture from a high altitude, and they quickly decided, oh, we better take that down. We'll put up a better one. And so they took a plane up and took a picture from a low altitude, because the first picture showed the bare agricultural fields on both sides of that narrow strip of woods. And the second one just showed nothing but a sea of big trees, which
Thank you for putting that in perspective, because it's
it was a visual lie.
yeah. Wow.
The other thing is that there was, well, I won't go into it.
Yeah,
The odds are very much against ivory bills being out there. Let's put it that way. But you can't prove that something doesn't exist. You can only prove that it does.
Good point. Good point. So somebody asked the male painted buntings. Are those breeding? The male has beautiful colors, but they're not. You wouldn't call those breeding colors, would you?
Those are its breeding plumage. Yes, the male's breeding. Yeah,
but it has it year round.
They are renewed prior to breeding in the spring. Like right now, they'd be molting and getting new ones. The young males, the second year males, though, can be that green color and look just like an adult female. The young females will look like that also, except they're duller. They're not as bright. They don't nest here. They only winter down here in South Florida. They do nest up in Northeast Florida, and then on up into South Carolina, and then across the mid-south to Texas and Mexico.
So Wade Matthews has his hand up. Wade, can you put your question, please, in the Q&A, because we can't connect to you. This is not a Zoom.
Oh,
we can? Okay.
Yeah, so.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so Wade, I've allowed you to talk if you have a question. Unmute yourself. Oh, here. Okay, I guess he doesn't.
Wade, can you unmute yourself?
He right, the hand's lowered, so.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there he is.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I've seen an ivory-billed woodpecker. It was in Cuba, and it was on an Sarasota Audubon bird trip. Now, somebody would say, well, what condition was it in? And there's the catch. Our bird guide was the former head of the bird section of the Cuban National Museum, and he had one, of course, there on exhibit, and he passed it around us, and we each held it in our hands for a while. So anyway, there's my ivory-billed woodpecker story.
When you were at the National Museum in Cuba, did you see the bill, the woodpecker, the ivory bill that had the really long bill? It was a long curved bill, looked like the bill of an ibis.
I don't have that recollection, but it could well have been. They had two of them that they showed to us, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you probably didn't see it then, because you'd remember it. There was a bill, an ivory bill that was a young bird that was traveling with its parent, apparently its parents, and the Cuban ornithologist, this is back in the 1800s, saw it, followed it for 3 days, wanting to know how that bird with the really long bill could ever feed. And it was being fed by the adults. And once he found that out, he shot all three.
Bad for him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wade.
Specimen exists. I've got photos of it.
I have a question about spoonbills, which I don't know if you can answer, but sometimes, quite often, I see spoonbills spinning their heads around. I don't know if it's 360 degrees, but it's kind of loopy. Look, they look kind of loopy, like, oh, I've had a beer or two. You know, their heads are swinging around. Do you have any idea what that behavior is?
No.
Okay.
Honestly, I have no idea what the behavior could be.
To me,
Maybe it's trying to dry its head off or something.
Yeah.
No, I really don't know.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to tell you is, I was doing swallowtail kite nest spotting in Carlton for several years. And the Debbie Blanco, who was the land manager, wore a bright red and white checkered shirt one day. And she said that she was really regarded as very, very dangerous or aggressive as swallowtail kites were attacking her. So ever since I heard that, and I'm telling everybody here, it's a good idea not to wear red or red checkered shirts when you're out birding. Do you agree with that?
I think that behavior is not unique to them. Most birds are sensitive to bright colors. And yeah, if you're going out to look for birds, don't wear a white shirt. I mean, white is bright. If you're going to the beach to look for birds, wear a white shirt because the herons and egrets are attracted and the gulls and terns are attracted to white. So that's a place you can wear white, but not in the woods.
Are there any other colors you should advise us to in favor of or to avoid?
Well, you want to blend in as
Yeah.
much as you can, and certainly bright colors are not a good thing in most environments. Perhaps there is an environment where it would be good if you were in a thicket of something with bright red flowers everywhere. Maybe wearing a red shirt would be good there.
Right, a pepper tree in
Yeah.
bloom.
Oh yeah, maybe. Incidentally, I've been studying birds in Brazilian pepper, and one of the birds that is really dependent on Brazilian pepper is blue-gray gnatcatcher. Because Brazilian pepper blooms all winter long, and there are insects going to the flowers all winter long, and they come to the Brazilian pepper for food, not eating the berries, but eating the insects that are coming to the flowers.
Wow. Somebody wanted to know if you could comment on the condition of the red-cockaded woodpecker population now.
Well, I was the team leader for the red-cockaded woodpecker recovery team for 8 years, and I wrote I was the principal author on the first recovery plan for the species. And when the recovery plan came out, the U.S. Forest Service did not want to accept the management recommendations of the recovery team, and they ended up, within a very short time, there was a lawsuit against the Forest Service for their management for red-cockaded because they wanted to clear cut and they wanted to be able to sell their timber and all of that, which they still could do, but if they couldn't clear cut. And anyway, there was a great deal of controversy. The red-cockaded woodpecker was then referred to in the news a lot as the spotted owl of the Southeast, because both birds were at odds with the U.S. Forest Service. And the Fish and Wildlife Service, any government agency really, is very sensitive to criticism and very sensitive to issues that are controversial. And so they decided that the recovery plan needed to be revised, and they needed somebody else to take the leadership of the recovery team, which was fine with me. I was still on the recovery team, but the person they put in charge of the recovery team, they hired from the U.S. Forest Service. And so the new plan that came out, the revision, left out a lot of the things that the original plan had, such as creating corridors of habitat to allow the birds to move naturally from one place to another. And it more or less matched what the Forest Service plan had been. But it was, anyway, that people need to know that that's what happened. It did happen.
Are they doing better now?
Well, one of the things that the original recovery plan did was to say that the bird should be recovered when it has a self-sustaining natural population, which seems like a reasonable thing to me. And they took that out. And now they want to excavate cavities for it in younger trees and move birds around without keeping track of who's moved where. I mean, they moved some birds from Florida to Kentucky. Funny thing, they didn't do well in the winter up there. Anyway, there's just crazy stuff. And the main thing is no controversy, no controversy. They didn't want any controversy whatsoever. And it's like the IvoryBill, taking the IvoryBill off the endangered species list. You know, I didn't even comment on it because the thing is probably extinct, in my opinion. But you can't prove that it's extinct. You can only prove that it does exist. And leaving it on the list would serve a great deal of good in protecting bottomland hardwood forest habitat.
Anyway, right?
Yeah. So it would be good to leave it on there just for that. But that's not really in keeping with the idea of the Endangered Species Act. If it's extinct, it should be declared extinct.
Right. With the red cockaded, can you make any generalization at this point? You think they're doing well, not doing well, not doing as well?
I think there's a lot of mismanagement.
Yeah.
I think that they certainly have declined in many areas.
Yeah.
They are becoming more and more isolated. But at the best, it's going to take a long time to get that old growth that they really require.
Yeah.
And we really need to leave more old trees and not harvest it.
And that's true.
And then the whole idea that that we should be making money off our national wildlife refuges by selling timber is ludicrous. I mean, that land was set aside as a wildlife refuge. It should be a wildlife refuge. And management does not require cutting the trees. It helps sometimes to do something to get some regeneration, but it's like the use of prescribed burning.
Yeah.
If you look at the data for natural fires, lightning started fires occur between about the 15th of May and the end of August or early September. And that's the natural time when fire would go. So we run prescribed burns in November, December, January, February, March, which we have no lightning at that time. So we burn up all of the ground cover habitat for birds that are wintering here from up north by running a fire through at that time. It has a different impact on the ecosystem than a natural fire.
I sure hope you would really talk about that in your radio program, because I don't think people get that at all.
Well, think about a lightning strike. It starts at a point.
Yeah.
And then the wind is going to carry it with the wind fast,
Right.
but it's going to burn against the wind also the other direction, but more slowly. And off to the side, it'll be a little bit different. So you get a mosaic of hotly burned and coolly burned forest as a result of that. So what we do is plow a fire lane and make the fire go in the direction we want it to. And we do it all at once because we use a drip torch to make a line of fire going along the fire lane that we've got and burning in only one direction. And you get an even burn. You don't get the mosaic of some shrubs here, no shrubs there, and that kind of thing. You don't get the diversity in the structure of the forest that you would from a natural fire.
Well, that's really helpful to know. I really thank you so much. This has been fascinating. If people would like to meet you when you're doing duty at the Corkscrew Sanctuary, the Corkscrew Preserve there.
Yeah, I volunteer at Corkscrew as a boardwalk naturalist on Wednesdays.
At what times?
And I'm there usually by 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I usually stay till afternoon. But sometimes I have to leave early in the afternoon, but most of the time I'm there. And, if somebody wants a tour on a different day, I'd be happy to take them.
Ooh, wonderful.
Well, that's great. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to have had you speak, and we all need to listen to your advice about the control burns and all of that. So,
well, it's one thing for industry lands, and it's something else for national wildlife refuges and national forests. And we need to protect our national forests for emergency situations and things like that in use. But the timber companies have come to depend on them. And, the lobbying, it's all very political. And,
Yeah.
and it's a tough world to work in.
well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your being with us. I wanted to just tell people that next month, we're going to have someone who is a field ornithologist talk about the insights on movements of snail kites in South America.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's actually the snail kites that they put transmitters on and have been following throughout South America. And his name is Eric John, and it will be on again, it will be on Zoom. And he, just for everybody's information, studied with Ken Meyer, who put transmitters on swallowtail kites. So he's an expert on snail kites and what we learn about them following them with transmitters. So thank you all for being with us tonight. Jean, do you want to say any final words?
Just want to say thank you to everybody for joining in, and thank you, Dr. Jackson. That was a wonderful program. I always learn something, and I've learned something tonight for sure. So thank you again, and well, who knows, we might see you in Corkscrew Swamp.
Great, fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night.